So now we have seen the DML, how to do a DML insert, update and delete. But what we have to see now next is to see how to work with the concept of governor limits. So in Salesforce, what happens is every transaction is limited to around 100 SOQL queries. So what do we do here is when we look at governor limits, every Salesforce Apex code is controlled by governor limits. Basically what you do is you have only 100, you can do 100 SOQL statements per transaction, 150 DML statements per transaction, and total number of records is 50,000 per transaction. So if you go over here in the slide which is given over here, this contains the entire limits. Why do we have this limit? Because it's working on a multi-tenant architecture, as we have seen in the earlier admin app builder. So as an org, only your tenant should not, as a tenant, you should not consume all the memory or shared resources on the force.com platform. So what is this? Let us understand this. Okay. So basically, when we do an insert, and if you do more than 115 insert statements, you're going to run into this query or SOQLs, okay, DMLs. Let us see all of this. Let's understand. So we'll use a list. So how do we use a list? You create a list here, and then you can create an object of that type and add the property values, field values that you want. But instead of doing an insert on the field, you do an insert on the contact list. So basically, you can do create and update records. You can check DML, governor limits issue using list. So let us understand all of this with an example. Now I'll head back to my console here, and I was creating accounts over here, right? So let me now do one thing. Let me create contacts. Okay. So I'm going to say, let's say create account ACC. Okay, and integer x equal to 0. Let me give an example here. While x is less than 30, let me create 30 accounts in one go, and let's see what happens. Let's say acc.name equal to AirSniff plus x, and I'll say acc.active. We need to have required field. So what this is going to do is we're going to set in two properties for account, and we're going to say acc equal to new account. So we always instantiate the object. Okay, always instantiate the object, otherwise we'll get errors. You'll have to instantiate an empty object, S object of that type, and we'll say insert acc. Now let's see what happens. We created an object here, so, and of course we need to increment the variable here. Yeah, So we need to increment the variable here. So what happens here is we do the execute highlighted and let's run this and see. Okay, so active underscore underscore C. And let's execute this. Now let's see what has happened. It should have created 30 records, right? So let's go to the account object and see how many records it's got created. If I go here and see the recently viewed, if you see here, see all the 30 records that got created called as sniff. Yeah. So now let's do one more thing. Now let's increase the number of records to 200 million. And let's start from 30 and do till 230. Okay. So that will be around 200 records. So let's see what happens here. So I just incremented the counter from 30 to 230. So it's going to create 200 records more. Okay. So let me just execute highlighted. Now let's see what happens. It should create the 200 records. Please pay attention here. Earlier we had created 30. See, now it throws the system limit exception. Too many DML, 151. Now if you go back here and see in the slide, as I told you, up to 150 DMLs are allowed. Now why is this happening? Let's explain. Let's understand here. So when we go back to our anonymous block, let's see what's happening here. Alright, so basically what is happening is we are creating an object over here and we are saying acc.name and we were doing insert statement. So when every loop, increment of this every loop insert is firing. So now this transaction unit is firing 200 inserts. So when it hits 150, it gives a limit exception because we cannot do that. That's a governance. So how do we overcome that? Let's see. What we'll do is we'll create a list object. If you remember, we have created list, right? So let's create a list object and see how this works. Okay. So instantiate a list here, and now instead of this insert, see the difference here. What we will do is we will add it to the list. We'll add the newly created object to the list, and then we'll say insert ACC list. Now let's see what happens if it creates that 300 record. So the difference here is we created a list object, and instead of doing an insert, we add it to the account list. Now let's run this. Now let's see if the records got created. So now if you see, it's created all those records. 300 records have been created. Okay, so this way the governor limit has been bypassed. Please take a look here. Using this anonymous block, we have bypassed but now this again has a limit up to 10,000. Okay, only up to 10,000 records can be bypassed. Beyond this, again, it is the final limit of Salesforce. Beyond this, we look at the batch Apex part of it later. Okay, so try this out. First try with the normal insert and then try with an account list.